All right, why don't you introduce yourself?
Oh, well, I am Miss Locke, and there's some of you that probably who have been at Faith Academy forever got to have me as your first or second grade teacher. So I really am really delighted to be here to chat to you about my beautiful country that I come from, but also to be able to just kind of connect with you on this last semester of your time here. So yeah, I'm pleased to be here.
All right, so we're learning about South Africa, especially during the time of apartheid. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit, what was it like growing up during apartheid?
Yes, well, I was born in England, but I was 4 years old when my family immigrated to South Africa. My dad was working as for a South African company when he was asked to come and live permanently in South Africa. He had visited and fell in love with the beautiful country that it is, because let me tell you, South Africa's is beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful country. My mom had never been, so she packed up her suitcases and off we went to South Africa. I was the youngest of four. My sister was 6 and my brother was 7, and yeah, it was an adventure.
It must have been quite a shock to get there, because Great Britain was not segregated like that.
No, and I mean, there was a lot of people. I think my mom was very apprehensive about going, and a lot of people were really worried about us going to a country, you know, that had apartheid and that type of thing. So yeah, so it definitely was a God move, because for our family it made such a difference in terms of our walk with the Lord. Because even though my mom had been a Christian, I don't know how much my dad had been a Christian, and we got involved in a church in South Africa, and my mom and dad's Christianity flourished. My dad obviously came to know the Lord, and we grew up in this wonderful church that definitely was mainly white, with maybe 1 or 2 black people in the congregation. But
so that was allowed.
Yes, it was allowed. It's very, because it's not a government organization or anything controlled. And I mean, my church growing up was very involved in trying to do outreach to the Alexander and areas close by, which were black townships and that type of thing. Having said that, honestly, living in South Africa, growing up in South Africa, I obviously went to a government school, and so from grade 1 to my grade 12 year, all white school. I had to learn Afrikaans as my second language, even though there were tons of other languages spoken, but Afrikaans was the language of the apartheid era in the government. So we learned Afrikaans, and I didn't have any white friends from school at all, and obviously...
You didn't have any black friends from school? No, white friends.
Sorry, yes, sorry, that didn't make sense. Sorry, okay. I didn't have any black friends. Yeah, obviously, because it was all white.
So were you like actively taught that black people were inferior or anything like that? Was it that sort of indoctrination in school?
Listen, there were a lot of people that did not treat black people well at all, and that was not my family at all. So we always as a family really wanted, you know, we grew up with a lovely helper in our home that we really appreciated, and my dad actually built her a home because obviously they weren't allowed to live where the white people lived, but my mom in the township and that type of thing. But they never really like gave us that, like, it was more subtle, I would say, that we were never learned like about any of the history of the African people in South Africa. We only learned about the white history and about when the settlers came in 1652 to Cape Town, the white settlers, and settled South Africa. We didn't learn about any of that other stuff.
And discovered it.
Yes, discovered South Africa like it wasn't ever discovered, which of course it's kind of similar history to the USA.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
So and also we learned a lot of European history and that type of thing. And of course, Afrikaans was very much, we had to do books about Afrikaans. And there was just, the other thing growing up that you must know is that actually the world knew a lot more of what was going in South Africa than those living in South Africa itself, because the government controlled all the media, all the television, anything that went out on radio. So that was definitely when uprisings were happening in the townships, or things were happening, actually we did not know about it that much. All the white South African boys had to do 2 years military service that was required. My brother ended up only having to do 6 months because he did university first and that, but they had to do military service. It was just very interesting.
So you were a little bit older then when things started changing, started shifting. What were you hearing about? Like, were you hearing about these black terrorists and things like that? Or
yes, they were always, shown as terrorists and that type of thing. I mean, the world knew about Mandela in jail, but we didn't really hear very much about that at all growing up. But there was definitely some uprisings. There was a bomb in a rugby stadium, and there were things happening. I mean, when we went to the shops, we had to have our bags checked, like we do here in the Philippines, but at that time, we checking to see that there wasn't uprising or anything. We used to have bomb scares, or bomb threat drills, at school and that type of thing. So we knew there was things were unsettled, but like I said, we were very sheltered from that. We didn't know a lot of what was going on in the world because we just didn't hear it a lot,
Interesting. So Nelson Mandela was released in 1990, became president in 1994. How old were you during those years? Like, what were you doing? What was it like during that time?
So I had left school, and I remember sitting.
You had left
in '88. I finished
high school.
I had finished high school. Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Yes. University. Yeah, I had finished high school and I'm starting university and that type of thing. But I remember where I was sitting in 1990 watching the release of Nelson Mandela on TV. It was unbelievable, and knowing, we are on the brink of something really cool. And I think the really amazing thing that happened was the first time I ever got to vote for the first time was in 1991, where President de Klerk held a referendum across South Africa just for the white people, obviously, because black people couldn't vote then, to say, do you want us to move South Africa towards democracy? Or do you want us to stay like it is? And my mom and dad, all of us children had naturalized to become South African citizens. So I got a chance to vote. But my mom and dad had never bothered to become South African citizens because they just didn't want to be part of, they just, I think, felt hopeless that there was no point in voting for a government. There was never options to vote for any government they wanted to vote for. And so, but they specifically became citizens of South Africa so they could go and vote and say, yes, we want to move South Africa. And so we went and voted in that referendum, the yes-no vote. And I think it was something like 66 or 69% of the country said yes. And so over 2/3 of the white population had wanting South Africa to move towards democracy. And that was pretty exciting. But it was not plain sailing between 1991 to 94 when we, for the first time, every person, one man, one vote in South Africa, no matter the color of their skin, got to go and vote. But God, I think, really worked a miracle. There was a lot of unrest during that time, not just between black and white, even though there was, but there was a lot of unrest between different African nationality, different African groups, the Xhosa, the Zulu, the Sotho, all of them wanting their person to be,
right.
the party to lead the country and that type of thing. But Nelson Mandela was an incredibly gracious man, and in 1994 was the second time I got to vote. We lined up as a country across the country to vote, and let me tell you, I lined up the entire day and never got to vote, and had to go back the next day to vote again. The lines were so long, but actually it didn't matter. I felt like I knew I was part of something really cool. This was history in the making, and it was an amazing thing. And there was just an incredible vibe across South Africa that day when...
Like a positive...
Yes, even in the lines. It was just so cool. We lined up, and there we were, black and white, lining up for a whole day and not even getting to vote because we had having to come back the next day. All in the line, but everyone kind of light-hearted, joking. These African ladies who had worked as helpers all their lives, and just like getting to do this for the first time in their lives. It just, it was an incredible
and feeling
day.
like it mattered.
Yes, their vote mattered. It was really cool, really amazing. And so that was the 27th of April 1994, and on the 1st of May, that was when Nelson Mandela was sworn in as our first black president of South Africa and the first democratic president of South Africa. It was pretty cool.
Had you, up until that time, like obviously your family was not in favor of apartheid, but had you been involved at all in trying to speak out, or?
I mean, obviously that's a dangerous thing to be doing. Could, lead you into prison, whatever. But we were very involved in humanitarian stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And with our church, reaching out, helping those who, obviously the black people were so poor, right? And so our church started a Saturday school in Alexander Township to try, because the schooling was so inferior for a black person as opposed to a white person. And so in the townships, many people from our church went and just tutored the kids to help them to get a better education. Even today, still today, we have from my church, my supporting church back in South Africa, had that same connection with Alex, and they do the most amazing work there in Alexander called Rays of Hope, which includes the Saturday school that started when, before apartheid, but just helping out child-headed households, because so many people have parents were decimated by AIDS and lost, HIV, HIV took so many lives, but yeah, it's pretty cool. So we were involved in that type of thing.
So there was if you had spoken out against apartheid, you were basically speaking out against the government. There was the possibility you'd be arrested and...
Yes, I've got, obviously, depending on how, I've spoken, you could help them, you could do things to be a blessing. But, we were always told it's so dangerous, don't go there, to Alex, which is, the township, Alex, don't go there, your life would be in risk and that type of thing. But, obviously there was such negative propaganda, and half of it was not true, most of it wasn't true. Yeah. What
year did you graduate from university, and what year did you become a teacher?
Yeah, so I became, my first year of teaching was the year after South Africa had become a democracy in 95. So I started teaching as a third grade teacher in South Africa, and it's pretty cool.
During desegregation, it was brand new.
Yeah, it was pretty cool to be, for the first time in the government schools, black people were allowed to come, and we had a mix of white and black kids in your class, and it was so cool to see these kids getting an opportunity for the first time. And also the cool thing being a lower elementary teacher, I got to teach the kids from the start, right? Whereas obviously we knew it was going to take a while for education to catch up or to give them that similar kind of thing.
So was it wonderful? I mean, was there a lot of anti-Black feelings still from the white students who'd been raised that way, or was that minimal?
Yeah, I mean, it was a slow trickle in. It didn't start, I mean, in the school that I taught at, for my first few years, we were definitely more white than black. So they were still, it took a while for actually, now I would say if I had to go back and visit that school, it would be predominantly black kids, because of course it's like South Africa is 80% black, 20% white. It's a very, very uneven amount of, people. So, and of course I was teaching in the primary school. I would say what was probably way harder was high school, universities, a lot of unrest, a lot of niggling happened in the universities and higher up in the education system, I would say.
Did you find that in general Christians were in favor of democracy and against apartheid, and that it was more than non-Christians who, I mean, I would love to imagine that, but knowing my own country's history, I mean, were there Christians who were very pro-segregation? Yeah,
well, I mean, the apartheid era would have said the national government of South Africa, who ruled South Africa during the apartheid from 1948 to 1994, that apartheid era, the national government would say that they were a Christian government. And the NG Church was the church, the NG Kerk, which whatever, was the church, the state church. And we had Christian education, right? And all that type of thing. I mean, abortion was totally illegal, of course. Now we are a democracy. Abortion is legal now in South Africa. It's an interesting thing because, in apartheid, abortion is illegal, but actually you are allowed to discriminate against black people and make them live, and that type of thing. So it definitely was part of the church. Not all churches were, it was kind of part of the culture. It became a cultural thing, to be, in South Africa, just like I think in the United States, you read books about the southern states and these Christian white folks and their slaves or whatever, it's part of the culture.
And even, I mean, when my parents' Korean father married my white mother in 1963, their marriage would have been illegal in all of the southern states.
Wow.
Even then.
And I must add that even before 1948, when the National Party came into power, they lost control during the Second World War because South Africa played a big part in the Second World War, because England really had a lot of control over South Africa. We were part of the Commonwealth before we became an apartheid country. We were part of all that. Black people never really had a chance to vote before we became that, even when we were ruled by, England and part of the Commonwealth and that type of thing. I mean, the world, it's just that South Africa we made apartheid a law. That was number one. That was really wrong. And we also were very late to the program. 94 was very late to have given black people the vote, right? So many countries had done it way, way before then. But I mean, in the early 1900s, well, we even see about Philippines ruled by Spain and everything that comes along with that. This world is messed up.
Yeah. So I'm curious what South Africa's like now, because we're focused so much on the early 90s and all of that, but like I know it would be naive to think, in 1994 it became a democracy and everything's been wonderful ever since. What's it like now in terms of the democracy? How's the democracy going, and how is racial prejudice and discrimination?
Yes. So, Nelson Mandela was president for 4 years. He did one term. I mean, he was old when he became president. He had been in jail for so long.
30 years.
Yes, and so, I mean, he only, and the way that South Africa works is that we don't vote in a president, we vote in a party. So the ANC, he was the leader of the ANC, and so the leader of that party becomes president. But he passed the baton on to Thabo Mbeki, who then passed the baton on to Jacob Zuma. And both of them, but particularly Jacob Zuma, did not. He was very corrupt. He is actually, there is a whole court case at the moment against Jacob Zuma because of all his really, discrimination. The way there were a few people, black people, who got a lot of power under these people, but actually the majority of the black African people living in South Africa are just as poor as they were under apartheid, which is incredibly sad. We had a lot of affirmative action, which means that we had in the workplace, you had to give jobs to, and senior positions to black people. It had to be, we had to even out who had the jobs. But of course, I think what happened was a lot of people got jobs that they weren't quite ready to have. They had not had the education for it. So, for example, our electricity, which is Eskom, like it's Morocco here, Eskom, I mean, there just has not been thought, they haven't thought ahead. And really, right now, there's pretty much a crisis with electricity. They've had load shedding where, just like here in the Philippines, where they have like times where they can't have electricity because people are not thinking ahead. The crime rate went up a lot after apartheid. There was a lot of crime, a lot of people were hijacked in their cars. It became pretty dangerous. It definitely got better, I think, at the moment. But of course, so many people, that was really hard. And honestly, I would say I still feel hope for our country because it's a beautiful country, but God needs to raise up leaders that can really be about the people